This is the Enduring Minds podcast, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. I am one of your hosts, Evan Birch, along with Jason Bahamundi, who's joining me again today, as per usual. Jason, my friend, how's it going?
Things are going well. It is, this will get published on May 3rd, but it is only April 2nd. So we survived April Fool's Day and whatever poor jokes people were slinging around the internet yesterday.
Absolutely. And this week is, I'm repping it this week because it's actually Speed Project week. The soloists already kicked off. The first soloist actually broke the record for soloists, Beal, one of the Speed Project athletes, which is awesome. So it's a kind of a fitting week for us to have our guest that we have on today. Obviously, this won't be published until a bit later, but before we kind of get into having the conversation with our guest, Parley Hannan is a former NCAA track athlete with Ithaca College, where she was on national podiums for 5,000 meter, 10,000 meter. She's also a 2:33 marathoner. These are all just things that she does. I think the number one reason why I asked her to be on the podcast is really her fierce advocacy for mental health therapy and really stepping into vulnerability. She is a professional athlete supported by brands like Hilo and the CLA family like myself. And today we're really just going to explore the wisdom that's found in those miles that breaks us and what happens when you take that elite engine into the silence of the desert. So I would like to welcome Parley Hannan to the show.
Hello.
Parley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, I'm visiting some family up here in Virginia, and I woke up feeling pretty decent today, so I'll take that as a win.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to give too much of your story away. We have a little bit of a connection, obviously, having ran Speed Project solo. That's obviously something that ties a lot of us together. For some reason, there's very few of us that have done it. Let's just say that. But our first question is a simple one, but a hard one. Who is Parley Hannan?
Oh. How do I make this as short as possible? Who am I? I guess I don't think I've ever been just asked that question.
That's good.
Does that usually stump people?
It does, actually.
Okay. I'm like, am I the only one who's like, oh damn, I fucked that?
No.
Okay. I guess I would say I am. Who am I? I'm a 29-year-old who basically right now is running as my main job. But I've spent my life for the most part feeling pretty lost in the sense of trying how I find fulfillment on my day-to-day basis, but also in a way that is healthy or healthier. And I guess I'm someone who's on a journey to just finding more compassion to myself and practicing leaning into the things that I've learned throughout my life that bring me joy, but also having these a ton of demons that I face on a day-to-day basis. So it's just I think someone who's has lived through a lot of trauma and that I've either put on myself or just experienced a lot of bullying, and I think now just trying to take all of those experiences and getting to a point where I'm a little bit fed up with that, and now trying to understand how I can use the things I love, like running and community, and become a healthier version of myself while talking openly and learning from those things that I've experienced. Um, yeah, does that answer maybe?
Absolutely.
If it's your answer,
Yeah,
it answers the question. And here's the interesting thing. So you started out with who you are as a 29-year-old, and then you went to what you do as running, but then you went right back to who you are, which I thought was really cool in describing yourself. And it made me think, if running is the thing that you're doing that is bringing you introspection into who you are and allowing you to process all along the way while doing the running.
yeah. And I think that with that, I tried to, like at first I thought like, oh, look, I'm just a runner. And I think I'm really trying to make an effort for there to be a little bit more distance from that, because I think what I'm really struggling with right now is just, as much as running fuels me, I think it's not healthy for it to be anyone's full identity. And I think for me, it's become so much. Like, I went to my grandmother's funeral a month ago, and literally the only thing anyone talked to me about was my running. And it feels like I need to have more than that. Like, for my own health and just for my, like, because when I can't be at a race this weekend, like I can't be at TSP, I don't want to feel like my whole life is like falling apart because I'm not doing this sick run. Like it's just not healthy, you
Yeah.
know?
So I'm a huge advocate for that concept too, because when I was younger, before I started running, I had adults in my life who would only talk to me about baseball because I'm a huge
Yeah.
baseball fan. And I'm like, yes, but I also am interested in business and movies and politics. Like we can have a more well rounded conversation. Then I found myself in running, and I will tell you that running and triathlon did become my identity. And I found myself getting burned out, so that when I started this company, Run Try Bike platform, it was to help people understand that you are an everyday athlete. And that means that, yes, you run or swim or bike or all three, but you also do all of these other things. And if you hang your hat on the sport identity, what happens if you get injured? What happens if you have a bad race? And then all of a sudden that trauma of your identity getting smashed is escalated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm far from, I'm not where I want to be in terms of that. Like, absolutely. And I don't know if I'll ever fully be there. I doubt it. Um, but it's something I've definitely started to acknowledge recently as I've gone through these periods of just like, I, I don't just need more, but like I want more. Like, I think also with the mindset of running being everything, that like deep down, like there's just like this avoidance of like other things that like life just needs more than that, you know? And I think I'd be, yeah, even if I'm in the midst of like running and everything feels like, oh, this is all I want in my life, I feel like underneath that, like it just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel, it doesn't sit right with me. Like, yeah.
So I don't know the answer to this question because I don't like to do too big of a deep dive into people's backstories because I want to hear it right from you. How did running begin for you?
Yeah, so I've always been an athlete. Like I've just always like grew up doing sports. Like soccer was my favorite. That's what I played through high school. And then like just various, like I probably played like all sports besides like I don't know, hockey. Um, and but I don't know. I went to college. My first college was out in Boulder, um, and like didn't play a sport there. And then transferred to Northeastern, um, was there for 2 weeks, and then got diagnosed with depression, and then took a leave of absence, and then um, reapplied to schools. Ended up going to Ithaca because my sister was at Cornell, and I wanted to be close to her. And while I was there, I just was like, I don't know, like smoking a lot of weed and just like really just kind of like numbing myself and just like not dealing with like my mental health in like the best way. Uh, but then I did like this half credit tennis course, uh, and the coach was just like, "Oh wow, you're actually good at this. You want to join the team?" And so I joined the tennis team at Ithaca, and then while on the tennis team, I realized I'm like, wow, this is like really nice being a part of a team, but I didn't really like the people. Like, I mean, some of the people were good, but I felt like the vibe just wasn't for me. Like, I wasn't cool enough, and it was a little bit triggering in the sense that like I was, and I mentioned this. I don't know if it was. I mentioned it before that I just dealt a lot with bullying growing up, and I kind of felt a little bit of that being on the tennis team. But I did feel like the purpose, like it gave me a lot of purpose on a day-to-day basis. And I always struggled through school with like performance anxiety. So being a part of a team was super helpful. And so I was like, okay, I know I want to be a part of a team. My brother and sister both ran growing up, and I really admired and looked up to their relationship. So I was like, why don't I try running? And so I emailed the coach and was like, hey, I'm on the tennis team here at Ithaca, but like, I like, can I try out for your team instead? And she's like, okay, yeah, like come out in the fall and we'll have time trials and you can try out. And I did, and I made the team, and that was that. And that's how I started running. And
Yeah. So two things quickly jumped out to me was one, the soccer aspect. The number of runners that we've had on our podcast that have referred to soccer being the sport that they played, in myself included. It's a very interesting one to me, because again, I don't know if you were the same, but I was the one that wanted to stay on the field. Everybody wanted to sub off, and I was like, just leave me on. Like I just want to keep running. So I'm sure it was like ingrained in me for a long time.
for sure.
And then the other thing that really jumped out at me was the going to college and being diagnosed with depression. That again is not the first, you're not the first person that has explained their journey into running or their journey into college in this way. What do you think it was about moving from high school into, or moving colleges? Like, what is it about college that kind of shocks the system for some people and kind of makes you have to face some things?
Um, Honestly, I feel like college to me, out of like all the, so yes, I was diagnosed with depression when I got to college, but I took a year, was it a year? I took a year off in high school as well. Um, when I was first diagnosed with anorexia and was like really, really sick. Um, and honestly, so like I think college was difficult in a lot of senses, in the sense of like my brain developing and just like more time being exposed to things. So my eating disorder, maybe just experiencing also different versions of my eating disorder with like learning what bulimia was and other things like that. But honestly, like college, I felt like I was bullied so much more in like elementary, middle, high school, that college was actually a little bit nicer because it felt like there was more people that just kind of were like, okay, I don't need to just like pick on everyone. Like everyone just felt like they were kind of like learning to stop getting up in everyone else's business. And so I found like college was a little bit more like nice in that way. Like I felt like I could be a little bit more myself with like less people trying to attack me all the time for maybe being a little quirkier. That being said, uh, yeah, I think you're just, I think the more you, college, just that age, you're just getting more exposed to like the being more an adult, like just needing to figure things out. Like it was probably like that over that span of, I guess for me, it was like having taken 2 years off. It was like I don't even know 6 years, but however long it took me to finish college. But like being exposed to so many new like antidepressants, and then like going off my meds, and just therapy, and just trying to like like so much more trial and error to like figure out like things that might help, might work. Changing my major like 4 or 5 times. Just like the overall looming of like, oh my God, like what do I actually want to do when I'm out of college? Not actually realizing that college is actually really just a place for you to just grow mentally. Like not really about getting a degree because so many people don't even use that degree. So, yeah, I guess a long-winded, as you'll learn, most of how I answer questions is long-windedly, but answer to that question.
Keep being long-winded because there's an opportunity to experience the way your brain operates and gives me an opportunity to think of questions all along the way because there's so much happening. So I wrote this question down before you started answering Evan's question, and I wrote, does running empower you because you're doing a hard thing with running that you control? And as you were talking about bullying, I was like, well, bullying is something that she couldn't control, right? You can't control what other people are doing when it comes to bullying you. And then anorexia and bulimia are a way to try to take control. And then now you're running, and I was just thinking to myself, like, she's doing something hard, which is running, and she's doing it for the benefit of herself physically and mentally. And I just thought, I wonder if that's a way for her to take control without death gripping it, right? Like, because oftentimes we can death grip things that we want to control and we end up um, sucking the life out of it. But if you're enjoying it, then you're able to continue it. So has running become sort of that opportunity for you to control something and give you and empower you while you're out there doing it?
I think so. Yeah, like I definitely feel like I it definitely is a form of control, absolutely. Um, and I also think it's a way for me to there's just a sense of peace I get. Like it just or a disconnect. Like it feels like I can, especially when I'm running. It just feels like it's weird. It feels like it offers me a lot of control, but in this also in the sense it like takes away my need to control because it's just this like overall like it just blocks out the noise for a little bit. Like it feels like I can just quiet my like screaming brain. um, so yeah, it's interesting. I think it's both like a complete sense of control and then also like opposite of that, just like feeling like this letting go of that control. If that is like makes any sense.
I think it's the perfect response, because I don't think that we too often in today's society, with the way the digital interfaces work, right? We've been trained by the algorithms to be so black and white, when the reality is we operate in the gray zone constantly. The only thing that might be black and white for me is I will never eat macaroni and cheese. That might be the only thing that is black and white, but everything else is a gray zone. And so when you're talking about running as an opportunity to be in control, to disconnect and bring you peace, it makes total sense, because the visual I had is as you're running, you're in control in that moment. And then all of a sudden there's a steep hill to climb. You didn't put the steep hill there, it showed up. And now you have to then put yourself into that scenario and tackle that steep climb. And so I think it's the perfect answer, to be honest with you. And I don't have another follow-up question. I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah. Man, where do I go from here? I go just like Jason. I love these conversations because you're giving us these little pockets of your life and your story that allows us to, I guess, like dig a little bit deeper into different areas. So what can you describe the different feeling between being a D3 track athlete and 300 miles in the desert? Like what is the difference between those feelings? Like you talk about this peace, you talk about the like being able to let go. Like what is the difference between being a track athlete and those shorter, I mean, you ran 5,000 and 10,000 meters, so not short distances, but being that track athlete and being 4 days, 5 days in the desert with nothing around you? What is the difference?
Um, well, I think there's a lot of differences, obviously. But I think one of the first things that comes to my mind is that like my eating disorder is definitely like a big part of my life, and it where I'm at with it changes all the time. And I know that's going to be like hopefully it will continue to move towards an overall positive place, but sometimes I go into like deeper, like darker places with it. Sometimes I'm like in a much more neutral zone. Sometimes I'm like in a really good, a relatively positive space with it. So that's like just always varies. Um, but I think the thing with and so with that, I think about the distances and what it asks of my body, and also the culture around that. And I think, honestly, like even with the marathon, I feel like I felt as though the culture in the shorter distances just fed too much into my eating disorder. I felt like with the marathon, so I often think about this, and I actually like I made a post about it after I did the Olympic trials. But was I did so I did my first TSP. I paced someone through the Atacama Desert, um, and that was like my first exposure to really to an ultra, and that was like 300 miles. And
Yeah,
then two
big
months
parlay
later, I
into that.
ran the I ran the Olympic trials, and I placed 30th. And I remember finishing the Olympic trials, and the first thing I thought about wasn't like placing as well or doing as well as I did, and having been injured on top of that. But the first thing I thought about was like how I looked and how like like kind of fat I felt, or like how I didn't like maybe I didn't do as well because I wasn't as like skinny. And like the first person who won was like a lot skinnier than I was. And that's what I was thinking about when I had just placed 30th in the Olympic trials. And I look, all around me is a bunch of people in bathing suits because that's basically what we wear. Is like, and it's not because we're in Florida. It's just what we wear. Um, and then I like thought back to 2 months prior when I was running through the Atacama Desert, and like that was the last thing on my mind. And honestly, it was like the opposite. Like the thing that was on my mind then was like, oh my god, I can't wait to drink this Coors. I like, or I like, God, ramen tastes so good. Uh, what like it was the first time I had pasta in like 10 years. Besides eating disorder treatment, was like during one of my ultras, and so that is like a huge thing I think about, like in terms of the differences. Is I was just like, I can't, this culture, like I can run a marathon and get away without eating, and like I can't do that with an ultra. And even the fact that like that's something I desire, like it just doing the shorter distances, my brain was just getting too sucked into like this unhealthy. Like I just there wasn't enough pos. I was losing any positive gain from engaging in those distances. And with the ultras, I was just gaining so much more positivity. Like, we talked about like finding something outside of running. And in the ultra space, I was like starting to like find things outside of just running. Like it was the community. It was like learning to like love myself and experience life through adventure. And um, that is like, yeah, I felt like I was like just doing these ultra races. I just feel like I'm able to do so much more than run within the run itself. Um, and yeah, so I think that like that's honestly like I feel like that what's the word encapsulates or that captures like all most of the differences there is, and like
Mm-hmm.
if it doesn't, the most foundational is like it's I think it just captures how much of like life and joy and uh, positivity that can come from like doing this, doing the longer distances or the shorter ones for me.
It's amazing what happens when you actually talk to people, the connections that get formed. So before we jumped on the show, we had a surface level conversation about a connection to Ithaca College, but you're now describing something that I went through as an Ironman athlete for years. I was more interested in losing weight so that I could solve a math problem of power on the bike. And once I got into ultras, I realized that being out there for 15, 20, 30 hours at a time, days at a time, you have to eat. And it helped me recognize the disordered eating that I was going through while I was racing at Ironman distances. So thank you for sharing that. The other thing I want to add in here is just a couple of days ago, today's April 2nd, March 31st, I put out a post about um, fueling and carb loading before an event. And I had raced a marathon, and there were moments during that carb loading where I was like, if I eat this, is it going to slow me down? And still dealing with that process and asking that question. And I don't know that, it's something that gets cured, but it's something that I'm better equipped today to handle than I was in the past. And it's so interesting to hear somebody else share their story about being lighter after having such a big accomplishment. Like the focus wasn't on the major accomplishment. So I just want to say thank you for sharing that, because I don't know if you've talked about this before publicly and the connections that happen from people, but that post that I put up a couple days ago has gotten so many people DMing me and texting me and thanking me for sharing that it has empowered me to keep sharing it. So as you go through this process and you're talking about anorexia and bulimia and racing, TSP and other ultras, is it important for you to continue to have these conversations in the open, in the public, vulnerable, because it not only helps them but simultaneously helps you?
1,000%. Yeah. I feel like I honestly, I feel like right now where I'm at in my life, it's like more important than the running itself. And like, um, and I don't know if that's because I'm in a place right now where I'm struggling a little bit more than I usually do, or not usually do, than I have in the past couple months. Like I definitely feel like my eating disorder voice is is louder, and that's can be really hard, especially when you feel like you've made a lot of progress and you're in like a little bit more of a valley than like a peak, or I don't know. I'm just in more of a lower spot. Um, but I think like the thing when I'm that I'm learning when I'm in these lower spaces is how important um, and good it feels to be amongst a community or like and talk about these things. Like when I made that little Instagram story post, Evan, um, that inspired this copy on this podcast. Like I got the most likes I've ever gotten on the story, and so much like positive feedback, and that made me feel so good. Like I screenshotted it and I just messaged my family group chat and like I just had a really good like therapy session and decided to be a little bit more vulnerable than I usually am on Instagram, and it feels really good. Um, and so yeah, I think it just goes back to like life being more than just running, um, and learning how wow, like I this it, the post wasn't even about running, like really. It was just I mean, I touched upon the fact that like was trying to I said something about races and trying to find my identity outside of running, but mostly it was just about like being a deep feeler and just wanting to like love myself a little bit more or recognize that like I brushed my teeth twice today instead of once or whatever. Like, and yeah, I just want to keep talking about this stuff, and sometimes it's gonna be too much for some people, but for the most part, it's going to hopefully just encourage people to do the same because I'm starting to love this more and more about myself, like being vulnerable, and it also allows me to connect in such deep and incredible ways. And so, like, yeah, I want to do it more, not just for like myself or other people, but like, yeah.
Yeah. A
That's
couple of things before I ask a follow-up question to you is that commentary about not talking about running and connecting with people is absolutely something that we have noticed at the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network and our Everyday Athlete Clubhouse is people are engaging us in conversation more about the things outside of our sports than the actual sports themselves. And I think there is a loneliness epidemic, despite the fact that we're more quote unquote social because of the platforms. And so we're doing our best to let people know that they're not alone, that they can feel free to talk about walking your dog or whatever it might be so that you can connect to people. So thank you for reinforcing that. The other question I have, because we've talked to a handful of elite athletes, a handful of professional athletes, and I've always wondered this because I'm not a professional athlete. Is there pressure to perform that is coming internally? Maybe that's externally there as well from sponsors and companies that you're working with, but more internally because you want to perform, because that is how you make money, because it's how you live your lifestyle. Because as you were talking about the eating disorder, feeling like that voice is getting slightly louder, and today, around now, it made me wonder. I was like, I wonder if there's an internal pressure to perform that she's putting on herself so that her sponsors are placated and happy that she's performing well, even though that may not be coming from them to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's definitely, and I think that that's another constant thing to work on, and that another thing that like where that self compassion piece comes in, or like, uh, yeah, I think that I am very hard on myself in many ways, and I think I, you know, recently, and it's I don't know how much I like can talk about it because it's like a recent project, but a recent like running thing I did. Uh, I wasn't able to finish because of my Achilles, and usually like with the speed project, I fell at mile like 160 during Atacama, and I broke my rib, and I kept going, and I won, and I look at that a lot of times. I'm like, wow, you're a badass. Like, you can do anything. But then that also makes it hard because when you're in something like this, where I'm doing this, 200-mile attempt, and I have to stop at mile 70, and I'm like, wow, are you like you can run through Achilles pain, like you're fine. Like, then I have this mental battle as to like, okay, like am I being weak by not running through this? Or am I actually doing the right thing and winning? Like, is that a win by being like, oh, you're listening to your body, Parley? Like, that's actually like really cool. And honestly, like, I told myself that I was winning, that I was doing the right thing. And like, if I think about it, like, I do think so. And my coach, encouraged me to stop. But I still, some days, I'm like, wow, you're like so weak. Like, why didn't you just finish it? It would have been a lot cooler for the brand. It would have been a lot cooler for the story. Like, you pushed through a broken rib and you couldn't push through Achilles. And so, yeah, there's like a lot of pressure I put on myself. Like, and also 70 miles is still like a long distance. But since I've run 300 miles 3 times, I'm like, you couldn't get through 70 miles. Um, and then, yeah, obviously, like I partnered with brands though, mostly because I think that a lot of brands have been interested in the fact that I've been open and wanting to just talk about like my struggles, and that's what's like, I'm not just partnered with, you know, no hate on Nike, but I'm not just partnered with a brand that's like a lot more corporate and just like, I'm just contracted, and partners that like know me as a human. And so I do try and remind myself that, but it is a little bit scary too, because you know that like your is like, even if the brands aren't directly saying like you need to do well. Subconsciously, I'm like, damn, like, okay, the last two long effort feats I've done, I've had to stop. Like, do they think I'm weak? So yeah, there's a lot of pressure I put on myself to do well, and I think honestly, it's that was what was really also hard about when I first started running because I walked onto the running team and I immediately PR'd every race. They became the national cross country champion, then set the 5K national record, then won the 5K and 10K nationals. And I just like kept going. I just like kept popping off. And I was like this all-star runner, and I never experienced the reality of the sport, the reality of life, that not everything is going to be a success, that there are not failures, but there's just some things just don't go your way all the time. And so I think that like that's a really hard thing is I think we're so prone to seeing like, you know, it's just so hard for us to look at being able to look at the positive sides of like not winning, like just taking like learning from I don't know, just looking at it as winning be all. And I think that that's a hard. My running has just been this huge, small, just success after success after success, and I now that I've had a couple slips, it's hard for me to like. I'm just trying to learn from those and not beat myself up from them.
There's a certain level of wisdom that comes when you don't complete the thing that you never would have gotten had you completed the thing. And I think that's something that I've had to come to grips with myself. Like hearing you tell your stories about like Atacama breaking a rib and dropping out of Mammoth last year, and I like I'll be honest, like I feel that so deeply because having this conversation, I'm instantly connected to you because I'm like, me too. And I think that's the part that these conversations, when we talk more about the failures and not necessarily the successes, that binds us even closer. Because I mean, not to say anybody can, walk up and, set the 5 and 10K, national records, but there's a lot of us that just like, oh, I hit the podium and great. Like then usually it's like, okay, what's next? There's never this reflection period where you have the opportunity to, as you say, learn from the not. I mean, I hate to say failure, I really do, but learn from the non-completion of the thing. And I just think you have to go through them. Like, I mean, I rolled my ankle 10K into Tahoe 200 last year. It was an immediate baseball, and I was like, I was gunning for a podium, and I said to myself, like, I'm gonna run to the next aid station. I taped it up, same thing. I was like, I can get through this. I hobbled for probably 6 hours to get to the next aid station. And I was like, I have to be done. Like, I can't
Yeah,
I can't push through this, and it would be silly of me to think that I could
yeah,
because of all of these expectations that I've placed on myself because of what I did before. And that's that comparison game of not comparing yourself against others. You're comparing yourself on what you did before. And it's just such a trap. And that's why, like, leading into this question, for me, I've really leaned into this idea of curiosity rather than completion or getting to that final thing. So when I say the word curiosity, like, does that light something in you to think that that could be an opportunity or maybe something you've already been working through or working on yourself?
um, like curiosity in the sense of just like exploring, like mm, just curiosity in and of itself, just based off the word,
Like
or
like curiosity of the races that you have coming up or the things that you're looking to do, like those events or those distances that are you're ready to pull that string and just be like, yeah, that's the one. I can't get my mind off of it. Like if you leaned more into curiosity than comparison of like what you did before, how could you kind of separate yourself from those two things and go like, you know what, that was Parley 2 year ago Parley, and she's not the same person. All these experiences and all these things you've gone through, you're not the same person that you were 2 years ago. So leaning into that curiosity aspect, like what do you think you might be able to take with you into the next event or the next race, and all these learnings and the wisdom that you've been able to pull?
That's a good question. I think that when I think of that, I think just overarchingly how I want to make a difference in the sport while also exploring my own connection with it, because I think something I'm starting to realize is that like I find these like I still just haven't found my sweet spot in where I want to exist in the ultra world. You know, I did a couple TSPs and then I was like, this is great, but I want to explore like more of the competitive ultra world. But I'm also realizing that I feel like being a part of the super competitive ultra world, I haven't given it enough of a shot. 'Cause I really haven't done many races in that scope, but I'm also fearful that will take away from my love of the adventure and the immersiveness in the like just environment and your crew. And I feel like that was what was so special about TSP. It just felt like this of this exploration of like life and challenge, and it just felt like this trip. And I know that uh, ultras in general, like the more competitive ones, can be like that too. But I also feel like my taste at Mammoth was like, wow, like people are like really cutthroat. And like I was up there with, yeah, I was running with Rachel and Tara and I don't know, two of the other top guys that won there that are big in the ultra world. Like I was up there, like until I died, and I, but it was so intense. Like it was shocking, honestly, how intense it was. Um, and and granted, I didn't have a crew that I really knew super well, so there was a lot of factors that like, and I never got to like have a pacer with me, so I didn't know what that was gonna like, you know, what was ahead. So, like I said, like I haven't really experienced it enough to like rule it out, but it is a concern of mine that like what I love about these ultra like endeavors is finding ways to I don't I, it's just not about being like super cutthroat and being super competitive. Like I know that, and I've had so many experiences where that's just led me the wrong way. So I just want to find a way to find a sweet spot of how I can use that competitive Parley piece while also still continuing to grow and really enjoy like these experiences, because it's not about the race. It's but I know I'm competitive, so it's like it's finding. I'm curious as to how I'll like what events I'll find the most pleasure in. Is it going to be these like really? Am I gonna find a lot of fun doing these super competitive ultra runs, or is it going to be going after FKTs and or what? And so I'm curious because I'm still so new to the ultra space outside of TSP, but I am learning, and yeah. So I
I
think
have
that yeah. Go.
I absolutely love this conversation today because when somebody is passionate about something, it is hard to describe. And so you having difficulty in describing whether or not I want to be at the ultra competitive level, or I want to go chase an FKT where it's still competitive. I'm going to compete in that scenario. I'm competing against the time and not necessarily worrying about somebody coming up behind me or how far ahead they're pulling away. It is enriching of my life to hear somebody talk about the sports this way. And the reason why I say that is far too many people think that when you become a sponsored athlete, a pro athlete, an elite athlete, it's just easy. Like you're getting paid to run. I mean, how much better of a life can you possibly have without thinking about the idea that you might push yourself beyond the envelope that you are capable of doing? One. Two, some enjoyment might actually get sucked out of the sport for you because you're trying to compete so heavily in that space to earn a living and get a paycheck. And so I appreciate your vulnerability in this, because I think it will open up people's minds to this concept that having the talent to compete and actually competing at that level are not one and the same. Because you may decide that, you know what, I'd rather be a level below, be elite, compete, have fun in these sports. And if I win, it's fantastic. As opposed to, if I win, what's my next race so that I can fulfill a contract that I have with a sponsor, or so that I can get the next contract from a sponsor, which kind of sucks the life a little bit out. So I appreciate you talking about this, because I don't think enough people understand what it's like to have to chase that next race, in a sense. And I got to experience it. My wife got to experience it when I was at Lake Sonoma a number of years ago. It was one of the hottest days they've ever had for the event, because it was around Labor Day, and there were athletes who were supposed to podium and they DNF'd. And they said that why would they put themselves in a predicament in that particular event right then and there, when there's another race coming up that is maybe more important or a better chance to win. And so, like, it's so complicated. Like, I guess my question is, like, do you feel like sometimes, whether it's with food or with competing at these distances and competing against yourself, like it's a razor's edge the whole time, and you're wondering, like, which way am I going to go, left or right?
Yeah. Like, you mean in the sense of like stopping or not stopping? Or...
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that like when I was doing the marathon, it was like I only ran 2 marathons. I ran one marathon to qualify for the trials, and then the trials. But like I remember the one, like the first marathon I ran, like, you know, mile 7 was like the worst. And then I felt so great, but there's times like during mile 7 I might have been like, oh God, do I like actually want to keep going? And then I'm like, okay, let's just like keep going. And then I kept going, and I'm like, oh God, I'm so glad I kept going. And so I think that that's like always like, always a question. And I think that that's honestly probably the hardest thing about when you're uh, doing these races, is just this like trying to analyze where those doubts or what's coming from, and what is a wrong decision, or also understanding that maybe there isn't a right or wrong decision, and maybe you just got to make a freaking decision. And then like, I think like something that you asked earlier, Evan, or talked about, was like you don't like saying failures, and like, coming up with another word for not finishing the race. And I feel like that's something, a narrative that I want to change, is the fact that like a win can be so much more than just completion. Like I think, and it's hard because you sign up for these races because you want to complete that. But like, if you think about it on a broader scale, like deciding to like take that like left, considering like looking at left as being the stopping of the race, like as a win, like that could like I mean that could really be like the win instead of going to the right and actually completing the race. I think that there's just so much more of a story than just the race itself, like just getting to the end of the race. And um, yeah, I didn't do the best job at trying to phrase what I was trying to say, but I think that ultimately, like, there's, it can be really hard to make the decision to stop. And at the same time, I think there's really something to be celebrated um, by making that decision because any ultra runner, any runner, that is something that you know is going to weigh on them really heavily, regardless of whether or not it's the right decision. And there's a lot of power to that. And I think also really shows what just being human is because it's not just going to be that beautiful finish line every time. Like life does not go that way, and choosing that left turn should be celebrated more than it is.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, Parley, and I think you're just in like the way we started the conversation to the way you're speaking now. I can already see you processing things and thinking about things in a deeper way, which is really cool to see. Because I think as an athlete, when you can get to the place where it doesn't matter what happens and that you know that you have the tools to deal with either outcome, it's such a beautiful place to be because you realize that you are the same person no matter if you win or if you lose or if you have to drop out or if you get hit the podium. Like you are still the same person. What you do doesn't make you who you are. The things you're talking about and things we've talked about today is what makes you who you are. Like all of those things happening, again, you wouldn't be the person you are today without those things happening. And I mean, my mental health journey, I feel very strongly that as crappy as it was to go through it, like life isn't meant to be comfortable. Like it's not. And that's not easy for all of us to manage at times. And we need to go ask for help and ask for those things. So that's what I'm hearing in the conversation is you're already processing and thinking and trying to figure out like what is that next thing for you and how do you want to show up for yourself, not for anybody else, not for the podiums, not for the sponsors, like because how you show up for yourself is how you're going to show up for everybody else in the end. So I just want to say that. And then the one question that I did want to ask about was this idea that, I mean, you've been in the desert, this idea of suffering. I've had a complicated relationship with it myself, and I've challenged people on it, saying that, you know, like it's not suffering if you choose to go and do the thing. But then I was listening to something the other day. He's a behavioral scientist, Arthur C. Brooks, and he talks about suffering equals pain multiplied by resistance. And what that means is the pain, the more you resist it, the more it's going to hurt. But if you can accept it, like you've talked about, like if you can get to that place of acceptance, that suffering becomes like good suffering. It's not this like painful experience that you're just like, oh, this is like, I'm dreading this. You're actually kind of enjoying it because you're working through it and you've accepted the fact that it's like I've put myself here, no different than you talked about with breaking the rib at Atacama. I chose to be here. This is really hard, but I've accepted the fact that if I want to continue, like I need to find a way through this. So, what's your relationship to the word suffering when it comes to these long distances? Having completed some major distances, but also having to have dropped out of a few major distances as well.
Yeah, that's another great question. I think that honestly, like, and when I'm in the midst of one of these, uh, endeavors and, you know, my legs are blowing up, I'll probably think back to this conversation and maybe, obviously, like physically it's hard, like there is suffering, but when I think of the word suffering, I think honestly more of the mental piece and sitting with like more mental suffering. Like I feel like the running, and I've done I already said, like did the rib, like ran through the rib pain. Like I uh, I've run through a lot of injuries, but I feel like honestly it's more the mental suffering and like being able to sit with more of the uncomfortable mental challenges I face. And I feel like maybe that's because I've been leaning a little bit more into like therapy and just I think and I say that because I think that these ultra distances is a creative place for me. So the physical part isn't really like the hard part. It's like it's the mental piece. So when I decide to like stop a race or something, it's I feel like it's less physical and it's more just like mentally my not being able to just I'm trying to think at how to answer this because it definitely ignited something in my brain when you asked the question, and I think it's more like right now I'm trying to learn how to sit more and process more of my like mental discomforts rather than just like trying to escape them. And running can be a huge escape from these like mental discomforts that I feel. So when I run, it's like mentally I'm able to shut off those mental demons. But when I decide to like not run and sit more with my mental discomforts, like that's where like the suffering is. But when I'm able to actually successfully sit through that, or like get through a therapy session I don't want to go to, or like take that day off that I don't want to take, then I'm able to just like reap the benefits of having sat through mentally that suffering. So yeah, there's suffering that comes from these like long distances, but in like it it has to compare it all to the mental suffering I go through. So for me right now, I think that's what I think more of is my sitting through my mental discomforts rather than my physical discomforts.
You talked about going to therapy, and I know that a lot of people will say running is their therapy, and I will argue that running is therapeutic. It is not therapy.
Yeah.
And as you're out there running, and you're giving that answer, I started thinking to myself as well, is going to therapy easier for you today because you're out there running and processing and going through things and hearing your voice in your own head that you can then bring to therapy, and vice versa, sitting in therapy, having those conversations, and then taking them out onto the trail or the road and being able to process that? Like, so do running and going to therapy, or do they operate parallel for you in helping you process all of these things, or are they completely separate?
Um, I think right now they're probably a little bit more separate. I think so. I've been dealing with in off like even since the Olympic trials. Like basically, my running the past 2 years has looked like hardly any running, and then showing up and doing a 300-mile race. Like seriously, like that's it's been not running at all and just doing all cross training. And then like when I won LALB last year, I literally didn't run for 3 months at all, and then showed up because I was injured. And then I showed up and then did LALD. And I was just thinking about Beal, and I was like, oh, I wonder what he's doing, like having like, to. I remember, and then I thought about my finish, and I was like screaming in pain with after finishing LALD, getting back to the hotel room. I was in agony because I hadn't stepped a foot and then did that. And so like that's what my running has looked like. And like besides Mammoth, I ran for like 2 weeks before Mammoth. But then this other thing that you'll hear about in a few weeks is like I literally didn't run at all, and then I showed up and started trying to run this 200-mile race, and then so basically I have not been running a ton, and now I'm starting to do more strength training for my Achilles, so hopefully we'll be starting to run in the next like week or two. So, but most of it is just cross training. But so now I have like a bunch of just like a handful of just not the best. I think right now I'm just like not focused as much on my running. Like I know it's gonna happen, and I know I'm excited for the next couple of months to get back into it. But I just feel like right now it's just totally separate. Right now I'm just like getting fuel from just other things that are like I'm just trying not to think so much about the running. I think it is like I know it's there, and it's going. Cool things are gonna happen, but I'm really just allowing myself to get ignited from my therapy. Um, and then, so ask me in a couple months when I'm back to running, and we'll see. But like, I'm trying to build a separate life outside of running being the end all be all.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, I can relate to the recovery and strength and all those things. My next race is in June, and that means I'll have been a full year away from racing, which hasn't been the case in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been a challenge mentally. But I honestly, strength wise, I feel the strongest I've ever been. So keep leaning into that strength because honestly, it has been the best thing for my running, and I have just been getting back into it, and I am noticing huge differences. So yeah, I'm definitely a big encourager of that now, and I will never drop strength ever again for mileage.
Yeah.
It just won't happen. So so we'd like to end the show with another great question, as you've been saying throughout, which is awesome. Where is your mind right now after this conversation?
But you guys are awesome, honestly. Like I just feel like in I think I just get really ignited by just talking to people that I don't know that are also vulnerable and um, I don't know. My brain is a lot of different places, but I think connecting has been like so helpful recently in terms of just making me feel better and realizing that like, wow, okay, life is actually like okay, like yeah, and there are a lot of good people out there. So I think that's the first thing that comes to mind, and it also gets me excited too to like uh, I am excited for what's like on the horizon with my running, and I think that um, it's nice to talk to people who value the sport for more than like just results. And it feels like through this conversation, and obviously just you guys having a podcast about this is you know, it's reassuring to know that okay, there's a lot of people who are in the sport who also are in it for just so much more than just the sport. And if anything, that just encourages me to like that is a reminder of like wanting to be like this is why I'm here. Like I'm here because not because wanting to run super fast and do crazy things. While I am here for that, but I'm here for people who just want to uh, share their love for something, while also acknowledging that it's a hard thing to love.
Amazing. Yeah, Jason says it all the time that, running is just like one puzzle piece. It's just one little piece that's in this bigger scheme of things it has to go in because that's what connects us all in this big scheme of things, but it is just one piece. So where can people find you if they would like to follow what you're doing?
It's my Instagram. It's pfunk, so PEA, like the vegetable, FUNKK. Yeah, it's my only, I think, social media. So, yeah, you can follow me there.
Sounds good. And I know there's a little mini documentary that Make Running did based on last year's event as well too, which is on there. So go check that out if you guys want to know more about Parley and see her suffer through LALV last year, just to get a little look at it. I think it's 10 minutes long, so it's a quick watch if you have the time. So on behalf of Jason and I mean, incredible conversation, Parley. I'm so glad that I reached out because this is exactly, and I say this all the time, this is exactly why we have this podcast. We may be a tiny but mighty little podcast in our audience, but they are so dedicated at listening. And every guest that we have on that is then able to amplify and get that out to more people. I think we're just going to create this little army of people that are in their vulnerability and like just wanting to grow. So thank you so much for taking the time with us. So in saying that, until next time, keep going the distance and breaking the silence together. And please rate, subscribe, review, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of Jason and I, thank you so much, everybody.
Have a good one, everybody.